Welcome to the deep dive. When you think of Kashmir, what first comes to mind?
Probably those stunning landscapes, right? The valley.
Exactly. Breathtaking scenery, maybe a sense of its really rich cultural heritage.
For sure.
But if we sort of unpack that image, we pretty quickly find that beneath all that natural beauty lies this incredibly dense history, intense geopolitical struggle.
A real tapestry.
Yeah, woven with political ambition, constant conflict, and these shifting empires.
That's fascinating.
So today we're embarking on a deep dive into a really fascinating, but often I think surprisingly overlooked chapter in that history, the period of Sikh rule in Kashmir, specifically from what, 1819 to 1846 CE?
Right, just those 27 years. But they're so significant.
They really are. This era isn't just some historical footnote. It's profoundly important because it acts as this crucial bridge, a vital transitional phase connecting the end of Afghan dominance with the start of Dogra rule later on.
And right at the center of it all is Maharaja Ranjit Singh.
Absolutely. One of the most powerful and visionary figures of 19th century India. His strategic thinking led directly to Kashmir's annexation, bringing in a whole new framework for the region.
And what's really insightful here, I think, is how a relatively short historical period like this, these 27 years, can actually reveal so much about a region's enduring identity and its ongoing challenges.
That's a great point.
So our mission today really is to connect those dots for you, to help you understand not just what happened during this transformative time, but crucially, why it matters, even for getting a handle on the complexities of Kashmir today.
So we'll be looking at the geopolitics.
Yeah, the shifts that made Kashmir vulnerable, the actual military conquest, how the Sikhs tried to govern this, well, very distinct region.
And the social and religious impacts too, right? Those must have been huge.
Huge. And the economic conditions, how life was for ordinary Kashmiris, and then, the lasting legacy of it all.
Okay, that's a powerful mission. And this deep dive, it's really tailored for you, the listener. Maybe you're prepping for a meeting, touching on regional history, or you just want to catch up on a piece of history that often gets missed.
Or maybe you're just incredibly curious about how empires rise and fall.
Exactly. And what that means for the people caught in the middle. So you can expect a clear structure, hopefully an engaging delivery, and plenty of those moments that make you go, aha.
Those light bulb moments.
Yeah, the ones that make history really come alive and connect to the present. So let's start by setting the scene properly. What exactly made Kashmir such an irresistible magnet for power? It wasn't just the scenery, was it?
No, definitely not, although the scenery is spectacular.
Right. But this is where it gets really interesting.
You've hit on a crucial point. Kashmir's allure was, well, far more than its beauty. It had immense strategic value. Think of it as a gateway, almost a natural fortress, connecting the Indian subcontinent to those vast trade networks in Central Asia.
A vital link.
A vital link. And beyond that, its economic wealth was just unparalleled, especially that world-renowned shawl trade.
Ah, the pashmina.
Exactly. Those exquisite woolen textiles, often pashmina, they were coveted luxuries across Europe, Central Asia, making the valley an absolutely irresistible prize for any empire looking to expand its influence and, maybe more importantly, its treasury.
So it wasn't just about land.
Not at all. It was about controlling vital trade routes, controlling a cornerstone of the global luxury market at the time, and securing a massive source of revenue.
Okay, so before the Sikhs made their move, Kashmir had been under Afghan rule for quite a while, right? From 1753 to 1819.
That's right, 67 years.
And it sounds like that period was, well, anything but stable.
Tumultuous, barely scratches the surface, honestly. The Afghan period started when Ahmad Shah Durrani, the founder of the Durrani Empire, seized control from a Mughal empire that was, frankly, falling apart. And this whole 67-year span was just profoundly defined by political instability and rampant economic exploitation. Get this. Over those 67 years, Kashmir saw no fewer than 26 different governors.
26. In 67 years. That's insane.
It really is. A new governor, roughly every 2.5 years, each one appointed by the rulers back in Kabul. And this constant rotation just meant zero continuity, no long-term vision for governance, absolutely no investment in the people.
So what was their focus?
Their primary goal, almost their only goal, was extracting as much wealth as humanly possible, often brutally, all to fund the distant Afghan empire.
That kind of instability, 26 governors, it must have just created an environment ripe for chaos and massive exploitation. What did that economic drain actually look like on the ground?
It was utterly devastating for the people. The Afghan governors, as I said, prioritized wealth extraction above everything else. They had zero regard for the sustainability of Kashmir's economy or, frankly, the lives of its people.
So the famous shawl industry, for instance.
Crushed. The shawl industry, the cornerstone of Kashmir's economy, producing these exquisite textiles exported everywhere, the Afghan administration imposed incredibly heavy taxes on the weavers, sometimes demanding up to 3/4 of their output.
3/4, that's not a tax, that's suffocation.
It was systematic suffocation of a vital industry. It crippled the artisans who sustained it. Imagine being a skilled weaver, your family depending on your craft, and most of what you make is just taken.
Just unimaginable hardship.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the artisans. The peasantry, the vast majority of the population, they were crushed under exorbitant land revenue demands, often exceeding 50% of their entire agricultural produce.
50%. More than half of everything you grow.
Think about that. Every grain, every vegetable, half or more taken away. It plunged rural communities into just abject poverty. Many were forced to sell their land, their cattle, even their children into debt bondage just to survive.
So the whole agricultural base was being bled dry.
Completely bled dry to fill distant coffers. It created this cycle of despair. Why produce more if you know it's just going to be seized?
And it sounds like the suffering wasn't purely economic either. There were significant religious tensions bubbling up during this time.
Oh, absolutely. That added another layer of misery. The Afghan rulers were predominantly Sunni Muslims, and their religious policies were notably harsh, especially towards non-Muslims, the Hindus, particularly the Kashmiri Pandits, and the small Sikh population.
How so? What kind of policies?
Well, they faced the reimposition of the jizya tax, the discriminatory tax specifically on non-Muslims, and various severe restrictions on their religious practices.
What?
Things like public celebrations of Hindu or Sikh festivals were often curtailed. Building or even repairing their temples or gurdwaras was frequently prohibited.
So deliberate suppression.
Yes. And when you combine that with the crushing economic burden, it naturally alienated huge sections of the population. And this raises an important question, doesn't it? How do policies like these, aimed at both religious and economic control, inevitably lead to widespread alienation?
And resistance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sporadic uprisings. It doesn't breed loyalty, it breeds deep resentment and a desperate desire for change, which ultimately weakened Afghan control from within. It made the region ripe for a new power.
So Kashmir was basically a tinderbox just waiting for a spark.
Precisely.
And that spark, that transformative force, arrived in the form of this rising star on the subcontinent, a visionary leader who managed to weld together these fragmented Sikh states into a really formidable centralized empire.
You've nailed it. The rapid decline of Afghan authority created that power vacuum, and into it stepped Maharaja Ranjit Singh, born in 1780, and through sheer strategic genius, relentless military campaigns, and this uncanny ability to unite disparate groups.
Missiles, right.
Exactly. The Sikh missiles, these independent confederacies of warriors. He transformed them into a formidable centralized state. His vision wasn't just about conquest. It was about forging a cohesive modern empire.
He captured Lahore pretty early on.
Lahore in 1799, making it the dynamic capital. Then over the next couple of decades, he just relentlessly expanded. Crucial regions like Multan in 1818, Peshawar the same year.
And his success wasn't just about ambition or brute force. It was about this profound strategic shift towards modernization, wasn't it? Particularly his army.
Absolutely. That was arguably his most profound strategic innovation. Ranjit Singh understood that traditional Indian warfare, while effective locally, wouldn't cut it against the growing power of the British or other regional forces.
So he looked outwards.
He actively sought out new military techniques, famously employed European officers, often disgruntled Napoleonic veterans, to train his army in modern European tactics. He equipped them with advanced artillery, disciplined infantry formations.
So connecting this to the bigger picture.
All right, if we connect this, Ranjit Singh's military reforms weren't just for expansion's sake. They represented a profound strategic shift that completely redefined regional power dynamics. He built a truly formidable fighting force, disciplined, capable of standing toe-to-toe with any contemporary army in the region. It was incredibly forward-thinking.
So with this modern, powerful army and a rapidly expanding empire, Kashmir, given its wealth, its strategic spot, It just naturally became the next big target.
It was irresistible.
What made it so compelling for Ranjit Singh specifically?
Well, several interlocking reasons made Kashmir the prime target. Its immense economic wealth, particularly that shawl trade, was a huge draw. It promised massive revenue streams.
Which he needed for his army and administration.
Critically needed. But just as important was its strategic position, commanding those vital trade routes north into Central Asia, west into Afghanistan. It was a crucial geopolitical asset.
And relatively close to his base in Punjab.
Relatively close, within striking distance. And crucially, its obvious vulnerability under the chaotic Afghan misrule and their internal divisions made it seem ripe for the taking. By 1818, Ranjit Singh was perfectly poised to challenge the Afghan governor, Jabbar Khan. The stage was set for the campaign that would bring the valley under Sikh control.
Which brings us right to that pivotal moment, the Sikh conquest of Kashmir in 1819. What were the main drivers behind Ranjit Singh launching this major campaign? Why then?
It was really driven by that potent mix of strategic necessity and economic opportunity we talked about. Strategically, Kashmir's location was just invaluable. Controlling it meant establishing a vital buffer against potential Afghan or Central Asian incursions. It secured the northwestern frontier of his growing empire.
Removing a potential threat base.
Exactly. And economically, again, that incredibly lucrative shawl trade promised a massive, consistent flow of revenue into the Sikh treasury. This cash was absolutely essential to fund the empire's ongoing military upgrades and its whole administrative structure. It offered both security and immense wealth, a prize too good to ignore.
So, with such high stakes, he dispatched a serious force. Can you walk us through the details? Who led the army? What challenges did they face?
Oh, it was a formidable force. In early 1819, Ranjit Singh sent a large, meticulously equipped army. It was primarily led by Mr. Diwan Chand, one of his most trusted and, frankly, tactically brilliant generals.
Okay.
He had critical support from Ranjit Singh's own son, Karak Singh, and the legendary commander Hari Singh Nalwa, almost mythical figure.
Wait, Nalwa.
This combined force numbered somewhere around 30,000 highly disciplined troops. Strong cavalry, well-trained infantry, and crucially, that modern artillery reflecting Ranjit Singh's investment.
And the Afghans, what did they have?
On the other side, the Afghan governor, Jabbar Khan, commanded a much smaller force, maybe about 10,000 troops. His main advantage, perhaps his only real one, was Kashmir's notoriously difficult mountainous terrain. He hoped that would be his insurmountable defense.
Fighting through mountains with 30,000 troops, supplies, heavy artillery. That sounds like an absolute logistical nightmare, even today. How did they possibly manage that?
It was an incredible feat, no question. Logistical planning, sheer perseverance. The Sikh army had to push through the challenging Pir Panjal Pass, a really treacherous route known for its rugged landscape, deep snows sometimes, unpredictable weather.
Wow.
But they pushed through, used local guides, overcame immense difficulties. The decisive clash, the Battle of Shopian, happened on July 3rd, 1819.
And how did that go?
Mr. Diwan Chand's strategic skill, his ability to maneuver forces in that tough terrain, combined with the overwhelming firepower and precision of the Sikh artillery, it was decisive. The Afghan forces just couldn't withstand the coordinated attack. Their defenses crumbled under the bombardment.
So what happened to Jabbar Khan and Srinagar?
Jabbar Khan saw the writing on the wall.
Hmm.
He knew further resistance was futile against such a force. He fled back to Srinagar, but it was only temporary. He realized the city couldn't be held and made his escape, leaving it basically undefended.
So the Sikhs just walked in?
By mid-July 1819, yes. The Sikhs marched into Srinagar, captured the city, and formally annexed Kashmir to the Sikh Empire. Big celebrations back in Lahore, naturally.
I bet.
And Ranjit Singh himself, wanting to cement this crucial win and show its importance, actually visited Kashmir in 1820 to inspect his new province, ensure its integration, however challenging that might be.
Okay, so conquest complete. Was it smooth sailing from then on, or did they face immediate problems trying to actually hold Kashmir?
Oh, the conquest, while decisive, was definitely not the end of the story. They immediately faced sporadic resistance, local Kashmiri chieftains, remnants of Afghan forces still hoping to reclaim the valley.
So they needed troops there permanently.
A strong, permanent military presence was essential to maintain control, suppress any rebellions. And you touched on the logistics earlier, that geography, the high mountains, isolated valleys that remained a huge hurdle.
Right, governing must have been tough.
Imagine trying to govern this vast, mountainous region, collect taxes, maintain communication with Lahore, all with early 19th century tech, supplying troops, moving revenue, ensuring consistent administration over 300 miles of difficult terrain. a constant struggle. Talk about a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. But despite those difficulties, the annexation clearly had major implications, didn't it? Both immediately and long term.
Without a doubt. Economically, boom, the Sikhs immediately got control of that incredibly lucrative shawl trade, which, as intended, became a major source of revenue for the empire.
And strategically.
Strategically, it secured the northwestern frontier, created that strong buffer against potential Afghan threats, significantly extending Sikh influence northward. But integrating Kashmir wasn't easy.
How so?
The population was overwhelmingly Muslim, with very distinct cultural, linguistic, administrative traditions compared to the Sikh rulers in Lahore. Managing that required careful handling, which, well, didn't always happen. And that sheer distance between Lahore and Srinagar constantly complicated oversight and communication. That factor alone really shaped how Sikh governance worked or didn't work over the next 3 decades.
That brings us neatly to how the Sikhs actually governed Kashmir once they'd conquered it. It sounds like a highly centralized system, quite different from what came before.
Very much so. The Sikh administration in Kashmir was characterized by this highly centralized system. All control flowed directly from the Lahore Durbar, the royal court, the central governing body.
So governors were appointed from Lahore?
Directly appointed by Lahore, typically trusted Sikh nobles or close allies of the Maharaja. Their jobs were clear: maintain order, collect revenue efficiently, and strictly implement policies dictated by Ranjit Singh or his successors.
So local decisions weren't really made locally.
Major decisions, taxation rates, military deployments, even significant legal rulings were determined back in Lahore. The governor in Srinagar often had surprisingly limited autonomy on critical matters.
Who were some of the key governors during this time, and did their tenures make a difference?
Well, the first one, Monsieur Duan Chand, who led the conquest, served briefly, 1819-1820. His focus was pure consolidation, suppressing revolts, establishing military presence.
Okay.
He was followed by Hari Singh Nalwa, 1820-1821. Nalwa was a really formidable commander and administrator. He significantly strengthened fortifications in key spots like Srinagar and Uri, showed he understood the need for long-term security.
Any others stand out?
Later, you had Diwan Modi Ram from 1821 to 1826. And interestingly, Sheikh Ghulam Muhyiddin from 1834 to 1841, he was actually a local Muslim elite, which was a strategic choice.
Ah, interesting.
But then you had Colonel Mihan Singh from 1841 to 1845. His time was particularly notorious: widespread complaints of extortion, really harsh revenue collection. He alienated huge swaths of the population, highlighting the real dangers of that distant top-down rule.
So it sounds like a clear hierarchy, 6 at the top, but they also tried to use local people in the day-to-day running of things, this dual system.
Precisely. It was a dual system, trying to balance that centralized Sikh control with, the practicalities of local governance. High-ranking positions, governor, military commanders, top financial roles were reserved for Sikhs or trusted allies.
But lower down.
Lower-level officials, like the Tehsildars, district revenue officers, and village headmen, were often drawn from the local Kashmiri population. Mostly Kashmiri Pandits, actually.
Why was that?
It was pragmatic. To maintain continuity, leverage existing local knowledge of customs, land systems, and ensure some degree of cooperation. But it also put those local intermediaries in a really tough spot.
Caught in the middle.
Exactly. Caught between the demands of their Sikh overlords and the grievances of their own communities. Led to difficult choices and often accusations of corruption or collaboration.
And how did they maintain control overall, given the history of resistance and the sheer size of the place?
They relied heavily on fortifications. Sikhs strategically fortified key locations throughout the valley. These weren't just forts, they were administrative centers, military garrisons. They maintained a substantial permanent garrison, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 troops stationed in Kashmir. But here's a key and problematic point. These soldiers often doubled as revenue collectors.
That sounds like a recipe for trouble.
It really was. This dual role blurred the lines between military authority and administrative duty, frequently led to accusations of coercion, corruption, because the military officials were often judged on meeting revenue targets, sometimes using brute force rather than on the welfare of the locals, built up deep resentment.
And what about the shawl trade under this centralized control? Did the state manage it effectively?
The shawl trade was brought firmly under state control through this system called dag shawl. It wasn't just a tax, it was a state mechanism designed to squeeze maximum revenue out of it.
How did it work?
The Lahore Durbar appointed officials to oversee literally every aspect, from buying raw wool to the final sale. This definitely ensured revenue flow to the empire, but it throttled the artisans.
It sounds like there are some pretty significant, almost built-in challenges to this whole governance model, the distance, the cultural differences.
Absolutely. That distance between Lahore and Srinagar, maybe manageable for a military campaign, was a huge hindrance for effective daily administration. Communication delays meant responses to local problems were agonizingly slow. Minor issues could fester into major grievances.
And the corruption you mentioned with Mihan Singh.
Corruption became pervasive, especially later on. It alienated everyone, Muslims and Hindus alike, who suffered under the demands. And crucially, the Sikh administration really struggled to bridge that cultural gap.
The language barrier.
Language, customs. The Punjabi-speaking Sikh rulers, often soldiers without administrative finesse, had trouble connecting with the Kashmiri-speaking, Persian-using population. And this really highlights a critical lesson in governance, doesn't it? A failure to understand and bridge cultural divides. It can undermine even the best-intentioned structures, leads to mistrust, resistance.
Yeah, makes sense.
But despite all these major challenges, it's fair to say the Sikh administration did maintain a degree of relative stability. They prevented any truly large-scale, empire-threatening rebellions. And they did integrate Kashmir into the empire's wider economic and military framework, even if that integration often felt coercive to the Kashmiris.
Okay, let's shift to the religious and social policies. These sound like they were really complex, maybe even fraught, given Kashmir's unique demographics at the time.
They absolutely were. Kashmir's demographics were the defining context. Overwhelmingly Muslim, over 90% of the population. Then you had a significant Hindu minority, mostly the influential Kashmiri Pandits, and a small number of Sikh soldiers, administrators, traders who came with the new regime.
So how did the Sikh administration approach this mix?
Their approach was largely pragmatic. They aimed to maintain control and minimize disruption to local life as much as possible. But their policies inevitably reflected the priorities and values of the Sikh ruling class, which led to a very mixed bag of outcomes, and crucially, it deepened existing societal divisions.
So the Muslim majority, they'd just come out of oppressive Afghan rule. Did things get better for them under the Sikhs?
Well, yes and no. Muslims were generally allowed to practice their faith, but they faced significant restrictions on public expressions of it.
For example?
The call to prayer, the azan fundamental to daily Muslim life, was banned in some areas, or only allowed to be whispered, which was deeply humiliating.
Wow.
And even more controversially, some mosques, revered places of worship, were actually repurposed, turned into granaries or administrative offices. That sparked deep resentment, a feeling of sacrilege. Imagine your church or temple being used as a grain store.
Unthinkable. How did they manage the backlash?
To try and temper this opposition and ensure some local cooperation, they did strategically co-opt some local Muslim elites into the administration. Sheikh Ghulam Mohiuddin, serving as governor, is a key example of trying to balance Sikh interests with Kashmiri sentiment, maintain some stability.
And what about the Hindu minority, the Kashmiri Pandits? How did they fare compared to the Muslims?
Their situation was quite different. The Pandits actually saw their status significantly improve under Sikh rule.
Why was that?
Partly due to a shared religious affinity, you could say. Both communities revered certain sites and practices, unlike the previous Afghan rulers, but more concretely, a key policy change really benefited them: the abolition of the jizya tax.
Ah, the tax on non-Muslims under the Afghans.
Exactly. Getting rid of that was a huge relief, financially and psychologically. It significantly improved their socioeconomic standing.
And their role in administration.
Because of their literacy in Persian and Sanskrit and their long experience in administration, Pandits were appointed to crucial roles, especially in revenue collection, record keeping. This massively enhanced their influence and power within Kashmiri society.
So while one group faced new restrictions, another actually saw their status improve quite dramatically. That must have created some deep divisions, right?
Absolutely. Deep and profound communal divides. You're spot on.
How did that tension play out? And what about the Sikhs themselves in Kashmir?
Well, that preferential treatment for the Pandits, while good for them, unfortunately fueled resentment among many Muslims who saw them as collaborators with the Sikh regime. It created or worsened social stratifications that echoed for generations.
And the Sikhs?
The Sikhs themselves were a small community. They focused on establishing their own places of worship, gurdwaras, like the one at the Mira Kadal in Srinagar, for their religious needs, community centers. Sikh festivals like Baisakhi were promoted, reminding everyone who was in charge.
Did they interfere with local Hindu practices?
Interestingly, no. They largely refrained from interfering with local Kashmiri Hindu festivals like Shivratri. Again, probably trying to maintain that delicate balance, avoid alienating all non-Muslims.
I remember reading something about a ban on cow slaughter being a really major point of conflict. Can you unpack that? Why was it so controversial?
Yes, the ban on cow slaughter was hugely contentious, and it's a perfect illustration of how seemingly religious decisions can have massive social and political fallout, especially in a diverse place like Kashmir.
Because cows are sacred to Sikhs and Hindus.
Exactly. But cow slaughter is also an integral part of Muslim dietary customs and religious practice, especially during certain festivals. The Sikh administration enforced this ban strictly. Severe penalties, sometimes even death, for violations.
So that caused huge tension.
Immense tension with the Muslim majority. It was widely seen not just as a dietary restriction, but as a direct imposition of Sikh values on their culture and religion, an attack on their identity. It became a massive source of grievance, a potent symbol of foreign rule. This policy really highlights how religious decisions can inflame social and political divides.
Beyond these specific religious policies, what was the broader cultural and educational impact? Did Sikh rule change Kashmiri culture much?
Culturally, sure, Sikh rule introduced some Punjabi influences, especially among the administrative elite language in official circles, maybe some aspects of dress, social customs, but, and this is important, Kashmir's unique identity.
It held strong.
It proved remarkably resilient, deeply rooted in its distinct Kashmiri language, its Sufi-influenced Islamic traditions, centuries of unique customs. It wasn't easily overwritten. The Kashmiri identity largely maintained its distinctive character.
And education, did they invest in that?
Unfortunately, education got limited attention. The administration's focus was mainly on Persian and Sanskrit, mostly for administrative needs, training a small elite. Not really on promoting widespread literacy or setting up schools for the general population.
So the overall social picture.
It's a complex mix, continuity and change. Pandits gained influence, Muslims faced restrictions, the broader population navigated the challenges of foreign rule, often without much tangible improvement in their daily lives.
Which leads us right into the economic conditions under Sikh rule. It really seems like the empire's absolute need for revenue drove almost everything they did in Kashmir.
Absolutely. That's the key lens to view it through. The empire's overriding, almost singular need to generate enough cash to keep its large military and administration running was the absolute driving force behind its economic policies in Kashmir.
So the economy wasn't seen as something to develop for locals?
No, it was seen purely as a tool for extraction, a means to an end for the Lahore Durbar. That distinction is crucial to understanding the hardship Kashmir has faced.
And the shawl trade, Kashmir's economic backbone for centuries.
Oh.
How did that fare under this relentless focus on revenue?
It remained the backbone, yes, but it suffered immensely, primarily through that exploitative dag shawl system we mentioned.
Explain that again.
It was this comprehensive state-controlled mechanism designed to maximize revenue from shawls at every single stage, squeezing the artisans' profit margins down to almost nothing.
About fixed wages, high taxes.
Both. Weavers were often forced into fixed wages, barely enough to survive, and then subjected to incredibly heavy taxes on those meager earnings, sometimes up to 30%. Imagine being a master artisan, famous for your skill, living in constant fear of the tax collector, knowing most of your hard work benefits someone else.
It's heartbreaking.
And add demands for forced labor, being compelled to work on state orders without fair pay. It led to widespread exploitation. This isn't just economics, it's a human story of struggle, despair, and ultimately, exodus.
People left.
Many skilled weavers, unable to make a living under such oppression, tragically migrated, went to Punjab, Ladakh, anywhere, seeking better opportunities. This directly caused a significant decline in the industry's output and quality over time. It weakened the very sector that had defined Kashmir for centuries.
So the state monopoly killed the golden goose, in a way.
It funded the empire, yes, but it bled the industry dry, stifled innovation, drastically cut profitability for local artisans.
And it wasn't just the weavers suffering, the peasants bore a huge burden too.
An immense crushing burden. Land revenue was the other critical pillar of Sikh economics, fixed at around 50% of agricultural produce, which was an astonishing increase even from the high levels under the Afghans.
50% again, it's hard to even fathom.
Imagine a family working tirelessly on their small plot, and half the harvest is just seized by the state. This incredibly high taxation, combined with periodic famines like the devastating one in 1833, just plunged rural communities into extreme poverty and chronic hunger.
How did they even survive?
They were often forced to sell their produce at incredibly low, preset prices just to meet the revenue demands. left them with virtually nothing for themselves, let alone to reinvest in their farms. Life became a desperate, endless struggle just for subsistence.
And what about other trade? Customs duties.
The Sikhs also imposed heavy customs duties on trade routes, especially that vital Srinagar-Leh route connecting to Central Asia. While this generated more revenue, it inadvertently disrupted traditional trade networks that had thrived for centuries.
Made things more expensive.
Exactly. Increased costs reduced the overall volume of commerce compared to, say, the Mughal era. This further added to the economic hardship across the valley, limiting opportunities for merchants.
Was there an urban-rural split?
Definitely. Srinagar, as the administrative and commercial hub, saw some superficial prosperity. The ruling class was there, some trade continued, but the vast rural areas suffered severe neglect, chronic poverty, unrelenting hardship, and this relentless focus on pure extraction, not investing in local well-being. It's a recurring theme in imperial history, isn't it?
Sadly, yes.
It funded the empire effectively, but created deep-seated economic stagnation and massive social discontent in Kashmir, sowed seeds of grievances that lasted a long, long time.
So the economic legacy seems pretty clear. Systematic extraction at a huge human cost.
Absolutely. The Sikh economic policies had a profound, lasting, and largely negative impact. Shawl weavers, once prosperous, faced ruin and migration, weakening a key global industry base there. Peasants were crushed by taxes and forced labor, struggling to survive famines, often made worse by state policies.
And the divide widened.
The urban-rural divide widened. The focus on revenue, while successful for the empire's coffers, came at the steep price of stagnation and discontent in Kashmir. And the legacy of these policies directly influenced the economy under the Dogras who followed. The shawl trade continued its decline, rural poverty persisted for decades. It shows how past economic choices cast very long shadows.
This brings us towards the end of Sikh rule itself, which wasn't just about Kashmir, was it? It was deeply tied to the weakening of the entire Sikh Empire.
Yeah, it's a crucial connection to make. The decline of Sikh rule in Kashmir was directly linked to the internal instability and rapid unraveling that plagued the Sikh Empire after Maharaja Ranjit Singh died in 1839.
His death created a vacuum.
A huge vacuum. It triggered a severe, prolonged succession crisis. A really turbulent time with rapid turnover of rulers, Karak Singh, Naunihal Singh, Sher Singh, each rising and falling quickly, often violently.
And internal fighting.
Fierce factionalism among the Sikh nobles, and importantly, the growing power and ambition of the Dogra brothers Gulab Singh and Dhyan Singh. All this profoundly destabilized the empire from within, making it vulnerable to external forces.
And those external forces were watching closely, namely the British East India Company.
Exactly. The British had been watching the Sikh Empire's rise and then its internal decline with considerable concern and strategic interest. Seeing the chaos after Ranjit Singh's death, they saw their chance.
An opportunity to expand.
An opportunity to expand their influence in northern India, secure strategic territories like Kashmir, which they saw as a vital buffer zone. This ambition led directly to the First Anglo-Sikh War, 1845 to 1846, a real turning point where the British aimed to decisively curb Sikh power and assert their own dominance.
Can you tell us about the key battles in that war? What led to the Sikh defeat?
The war kicked off in December 1845, the Battle of Mudki. The British won, but it was costly for them. The truly decisive fight, though, the one that sealed the Sikh Empire's fate, was the Battle of Sobraon in February 1846.
What happened at Sobraon?
It was brutal. Intense. The Sikh army suffered a crushing defeat. It was partly due to internal betrayal, some commanders didn't fully commit, but also undeniably due to the superior tactics, discipline, and firepower of the British forces. That defeat really broke the back of the Sikh military.
And the result of this war was codified in treaties, leading to the infamous sale of Kashmir.
That's exactly right. The immediate consequence was the Treaty of Lahore, signed March 9, 1846. It forced the defeated Sikhs to give up huge amounts of territory, including Kashmir, Jammu, other strategic areas, plus a massive indemnity payment.
A huge fine.
A huge fine. But the British, having secured Kashmir on paper, weren't really positioned or maybe weren't willing to govern it directly right then. They lacked the administrative setup for such a difficult, distant region. Their focus was elsewhere.
Which led to the next treaty.
Which led, just a week later, March 16, 1846, to the Treaty of Amritsar. A truly fascinating, almost purely transactional, and deeply controversial moment.
This is where Gulab Singh Dogra steps firmly into the picture. What exactly happened with this sale?
Under the Treaty of Amritsar, the British, in a move that really underscores how territories and people became commodities in imperial games, transferred Kashmir to Gulab Singh Dogra.
He'd served Ranjit Singh, controlled Jammu already?
Correct. He was a significant player, had served Ranjit Singh, controlled Jammu. His role in the Anglo-Sikh War was complex. Some see him as strategically siding with the British. Essentially, Gulab Singh purchased Kashmir from the British for 75 lakh rupees.
75 lakh, an enormous sum then.
Roughly £500,000 sterling at the time. Huge. This transaction made him the Maharaja of the newly formed state of Jammu and Kashmir. Crucially, though, under British suzerainty.
Meaning
He had to provide military help to the British when asked. And while he had internal autonomy, he was ultimately beholden to them. A loyal client ruler. This treaty is just a stark moment. Highlights how territories, millions of people became bargaining chips, transferred between rulers with zero consultation.
So what were the immediate changes for Kashmir under this new Dogra rule? Did life improve for the average Kashmiri?
For Kashmir, this marked the definitive end of Sikh rule and the start of Dogra dominance under British influence. Gulab Singh moved fast and ruthlessly to consolidate his power, suppressed local resistance, reorganized the administration for his benefit.
And the British role?
The British kept indirect but firm control via a resident station in Srinagar. Ensuring Kashmir remained that strategic buffer against Russia or Afghanistan, the great game was heating up.
But for the people, any relief?
Sadly, no. Little immediate relief or improvement. Dogra rule largely continued and in some ways even intensified many of the exploitative Sikh policies. High taxes, strict state control over the shawl trade, religious restrictions. The cycle of extraction and hardship unfortunately just continued under a new master.
Which brings us finally to the legacy of Sikh rule in Kashmir. It sounds like a truly transformative yet incredibly complex period that really set the stage for what followed.
It absolutely was. Sikh rule, 1819 to 1846, profoundly reshaped Kashmir's political, social, economic landscape, left an indelible mark. Under Ranjit Singh, they did end the chaotic Afghan misrule, establish a centralized administration.
Focus on revenue and military control.
Primarily, yes, often at the expense of local well-being. The conquest itself in 1819, the Battle of Shopian, showed their impressive military power, integrating Kashmir into a wider regional structure.
But despite those achievements, they faced huge challenges governing, interacting with the local culture.
Precisely. They really struggled with governing a distant, culturally distinct place like Kashmir. Understanding and responding to local needs, local sentiments, it wasn't their strength. Their economic policies were undeniably exploitative.
The shawl trade suffering, peasants in poverty.
Exactly. The shawl trade, once a source of pride and wealth, suffered terribly from taxes, state monopolies, driving artisans away. Peasants plunged deeper into poverty by land revenue demands, barely surviving famines, and their religious policies.
The cow slaughter ban, restrictions on Muslims.
Deepened communal tensions, created lasting grievances, even while they elevated the Kashmiri Pandit status. It really shows how pursuing imperial revenue and control, even if it brings some order, can sow deep discontent and future conflict if local needs and sensitivities are just ignored.
So what does this all mean for the legacy? It sounds like, as you said, a paradox. Stability on one hand, deep resentment on the other.
That's a perfect way to put it. A complex, paradoxical legacy. On one side, yes, Sikh rule brought relative stability after decades of Afghan chaos, integrated Kashmir into a broader empire, secured its frontiers.
But the costs?
On the other side, the exploitative economics, the perceived religious restrictions, they fueled widespread discontent, especially among the Muslim majority. This deep-seated resentment set the stage for challenges that continued, often worsened, under the Dogras.
And the Treaty of Amritsar kind of sums it up.
It's perhaps the ultimate symbol of the era, highlighting Kashmir's unfortunate status as a pawn in bigger imperial games, not a master of its own fate.
And this period clearly left a profound, lasting imprint on Kashmiri society that we can still see traces of today.
Indeed, it fundamentally influenced administrative structures, deeply impacted communal dynamics, creating or solidifying divisions, and shaped economic conditions for decades, maybe centuries. Understanding this era gives critical insights into the historical forces shaping modern Jammu and Kashmir.
From its integration into wider politics.
To the enduring challenges of governance, identity, the complex relationship between rulers and ruled in what remains a diverse, often contested region, it reminds us historical events aren't isolated incidents. They lay the groundwork for future challenges. They continue to shape identity, shape conflict, even generations later.
So after this deep dive, here's something to think about. How do those administrative, those economic decisions made by distant powers way back then, decisions driven by imperial needs for revenue and control, How do they continue to echo? How do they manifest in the local challenges, the identity struggles of a region like Kashmir today? What can we learn from this specific period about the sheer complexity of governing diverse societies, especially when the priorities of the rulers seem to clash so fundamentally with the well-being of the people being ruled?
It's a vital question, and it has relevance far beyond Kashmir. This period serves as such a powerful reminder, doesn't it? How resource-rich or strategically vital places often become these intense sites of power struggles.
And the human cost gets overlooked.
The human cost often bears the heaviest burden. Understanding these intricate historical layers, it's not just academic, it's absolutely key to really grasping the complexities of the present and maybe, just maybe, envisioning a different kind of future.